Hi everyone, this is Noel Jason, and once again, welcome back to my YouTube channel, Basic Speech Practice and Knowledge Listening. So today I am going to deliver the longest speech I have never delivered before because I can't avoid these informations, and also I'm going to deliver a speech on the most longest reigning monarch and the most longest lived British monarch in the United Kingdom who was very famous, who died recently at Balmoral Castle in Aberdeenshire in Scotland when she was aged 96, named Queen Elizabeth II. Queen Elizabeth II, or her full name Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor, was the Queen of the United Kingdom from 6th February 1952 until her death on 8th September 2022. Her reign of 70 years and 214 days was the longest of any British monarch and the second longest recorded of any monarch of a sovereign country. She was the queen regnant of 32 sovereign states during her life and served as a monarch of 15 of them at the time of her death. The Queen was born on 21st April 1926 in Mayfair, London, UK as the first child of the Duke and the Duchess of York, who were later known as Duke George VI and Duchess Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. Her father acceded to the throne in 1936 after her grandfather George V passed away upon the abdication of his brother King Edward VIII, making Elizabeth the heir presumptive. She was educated privately at home and began to undertake public duties during the Second World War, serving in the Auxiliary Territorial Service. In September 1939, the Britain entered the Second World War. Lord Hailsham, a British lawyer and a politician, suggested that Princesses Elizabeth and Margaret should be evacuated to Canada to avoid the frequent aerial bombings of London by the Luftwaffe, an aerial warfare branch of the German Unified Forces of the Nazi Germany before and during World War II. This was rejected by the mother, who declared that the children won't go without me. I won't leave without the king, and the king will never leave. The princesses stayed at Balmoral Castle in Scotland until Christmas 1939 when they moved to Sandringham House in Norfolk. From February to May 1940, they lived at the Royal Lodge in Windsor until moving to the Windsor Castle, where they lived for most of the next 5 years. At Windsor, the princesses staged pantomimes, which is a type of musical comedy stage production designed for family entertainment at Christmas in aid of the Queen's Wool Fund, which bought yarn to knit into military garments. In 1940, the 14-year-old Princess Elizabeth made her first radio broadcast during the BBC's Children's Hour, addressing other children who had been evacuated from the cities. She stated that we are trying to do all we can to help our gallant sailors, soldiers, and airmen, and we are trying to bear our own share of the danger and sadness of war. We know, every one of us, that in the end all will be well. In 1943, Elizabeth undertook her first solo public appearance on a visit to the Grenadier Guards, of which she had been appointed colonel the previous year. Princess Elizabeth went on her overseas tour in 1947, accompanying her parents through southern Africa. During the tour, in a broadcast to the British Commonwealth on her 21st birthday, she made the following pledge: I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and the service of a great imperial family to which we all belong. According to the Wikipedia, this speech of Princess Elizabeth was written by Dermot Mora, a journalist for The Times, which is a British daily newspaper. In 1944, the father of Queen Elizabeth II named her as a member of the Privy Council and the Council of State, enabling her to act on his behalf when he was out of the country. According to History.com, in 1947, soon after the royal family returned from an official visit to South Africa and Rhodesia, they announced Elizabeth's engagement to Prince Philip of Greece, her third cousin and a lieutenant in the Royal Navy. She had set her sights on him when she was only 13 years old, and their relationship developed through visits and correspondence during the war. Before the marriage, Philip renounced his Greek and Danish titles, officially converted from Greek Orthodoxy to Anglicanism, and adopted the Italic style Lieutenant Philip Mountbatten, taking the surname of his mother's family. Shortly before the wedding, he was created the Duke of Edinburgh and granted the style His Royal Highness. Elizabeth and Philip were married on 20th November 1947 at Westminster Abbey. They received over 2,500 wedding gifts from all around the world. Elizabeth gave birth to her first child, Prince Charles of Wales, who is now known as King Charles III, on 14th November 1948. 1 month earlier, the king had issued letters patent allowing her children to use the style and title of a royal prince or princess to which they otherwise would not have been entitled as their father was no longer a royal prince. A second child, Prince Anne, was born to Elizabeth on 15th August 1950. George VI's health declined during 1951, and Elizabeth frequently stood in for him during public events. When she toured Canada and visited President Harry S. Truman in Washington, D.C. in October 1951, her private secretary, Martin Chartres, carried a draft accession declaration in case of the king's death while she was on tour. In early 1952, Elizabeth and Philip set out for a tour of Australia and New Zealand by way of the British colony of Kenya. On 6th February 1952, they had just returned to their Kenyan home, Sagana Lodge, after a night spent at the Treetops Hotel when the word arrived of the death of George VI, who was aged 56 at the time of his death, and Elizabeth's consequent accession to the throne with immediate effect. Philip broke the news to the new queen. She chose to retain Elizabeth as a regnal name. Thus, she was called Elizabeth II, which offends many Scots as she was the first Elizabeth to rule in Scotland. She was proclaimed queen throughout her reigns, and the royal party hastily returned to the United Kingdom. Elizabeth and Philip moved into the Buckingham Palace. From the Queen Elizabeth's birth onwards, the British Empire continued its transformation into the Commonwealth of Nations. By the time of her accession in 1952, her role as head of multiple independent states was already established. In 1953, the Queen and her husband Philip embarked on a 7-month round-the-world tour, visiting 13 countries and covering more than 40,000 miles by land, air, and sea. She became the first reigning monarch of Australia and New Zealand to visit those nations. During the tour, the crowd were immense. 3/4 of the population of Australia were said to have seen her. Through her reign, Elizabeth made hundreds of state visits to other countries and tours of the Commonwealth. She was the most widely traveled head of the state. Elizabeth II gave birth to her child, Prince Andrew, on 19th February 1916, which was the first birth to a reigning British monarch since 1857. Her fourth child, Prince Edward, was born on 10th March 1964. Elizabeth toured Yugoslavia in October 1972, becoming the first British monarch to visit a communist country. She was received at the airport by President Josip Broz Tito, and a crowd of thousands greeted her in Belgrade. In 1977, Elizabeth marked the silver jubilee of her accession. Parties and events took place through the Commonwealth, many coinciding with her associated national and Commonwealth tours. During the 1981 Trooping the Colours ceremony, 6 weeks before the wedding of Prince Charles and Princess Diana Spencer, 6 shots were fired at Queen Elizabeth II from close range as she rode down the Mall in London on her horse named Burmese. Police later discovered that the shots were blanks. The 17-year-old assailant, Marcus Sargent, was sentenced to 5 years in prison and released. That October, Elizabeth was the subject of another attack while on a visit to Dunedin in New Zealand. Christopher John Lewis, who was 17 years old, fired a shot with .22 long rifle from the fifth floor of a building overlooking the parade, but missed the shot. He was arrested but never charged with attempted murder or treason and sentenced to 3 years in jail for unlawful possession and discharge of firearm. 2 years into his sentence, he attempted to escape a psychiatric hospital with the intention of assassinating Charles, Prince of Wales, who was visiting the country with Diana and their son, Prince William. In 2002, Elizabeth marked her Golden Jubilee, the 50th anniversary of her accession. Her sister died on February 9, 2002, at the age of 71, and her mother died on 30th March 2002 at the age of 101, respectively. And the media speculated on whether the Jubilee would be a success or a failure. She again undertook an extensive tour of her realms, beginning in Jamaica in February, where she called the farewell banquet memorable after a power cut plunged the king's house, the official residence of the Governor General, into the darkness. Elizabeth's 2012 Diamond Jubilee marked 60 years on the throne, and celebrations were held throughout her realms, the wider Commonwealth, and beyond. She and her husband undertook an extensive tour of the United Kingdom, while her children and grandchildren embarked on royal tours of other Commonwealth states on her behalf. On 4th June, Jubilee beacons were lit around the world. While touring Manchester as part of her Jubilee celebrations, Elizabeth made a surprise appearance at a wedding party at Manchester Town Hall, which then made international headlines. On 18 December, she became the first British sovereign to attend a peacetime cabinet meeting since George III in 1781. Elizabeth, who opened the 1976 Summer Olympics in Montreal, also opened the 2012 Summer Olympics and Paralympics in London, making her the first head of the state to open two Olympic Games in two countries. For the London Olympics, she played herself in a short film as part of the opening ceremony. On March 3, 2013, Elizabeth stayed overnight at King Edward VII's Hospital as a precaution after developing symptoms of gastroenteritis. A week later, she signed the new Charter of the Commonwealth. Because of her age and the need for her to limit traveling, in 2013, she chose not to attend the biennial Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting for the first time in 40 years. She was represented at the summit in Sri Lanka by Prince Charles. Queen Elizabeth surpassed her great-great-grandmother, Queen Victoria, to become the longest-lived British monarch on 21st December 2007, and the longest-reigning British monarch and longest-reigning Queen Regent and female head of states in the world on 9th September 2015. She became the oldest monarch after the death of King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia on 23rd January 2015. She later became the longest reigning monarch and the longest serving head of state following the death of King Bhumibol of Thailand on 13th October 2016, and the oldest current head of state on the resignation of Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe on 21st November 2017. On 6th February 2017, she became the first British monarch to commemorate a Sapphire Jubilee, and on 20th November, she was the first British monarch to celebrate a Platinum wedding anniversary. Philip had retired from his official duties as the Queen's consort in August 2017. On 19th March 2020, as the COVID-19 pandemic hit the United Kingdom, Elizabeth moved to Windsor Castle and sequestered there as a precaution. Public engagements were cancelled, and Windsor Castle followed a strict sanitary protocol nicknamed HMS Bubble. In 2021, Elizabeth received her first COVID-19 vaccination in January and the second vaccination on April, respectively. Prince Philip died on 9th April 2021 at the age of 99 after 73 years of marriage, making Elizabeth the first British monarch to reign as a widow since Queen Victoria. Elizabeth II's Platinum Jubilee began on 6th February 2012, marking 70 years since she acceded to the throne on her father's death. On the eve of the date, she held a reception at Sandringham House for pensioners, local Women's Institute members, and charity volunteers. Later that month, Elizabeth had mild cold like symptoms and tested positive for COVID 19 along with some staff and family members. She cancelled two virtual audiences on 22nd February but held a phone conversation with Prime Minister Boris Johnson the following day amid a crisis on the Russo-Ukrainian border, following which she made a donation to the Disasters Emergency Committee Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal. On 28th February, she was reported to have recovered and spent time with her family at Frogmore in England. On September 8, 2022, the Buckingham Palace announced that Elizabeth was under medical supervision and Balmoral Castle after doctors expressed concern. The statement by Buckingham Palace was that following further evaluation this morning, the Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended she remain under medical supervision. The Queen remains comfortable and at Balmoral. Elizabeth's four children, along with her daughters-in-law and grandsons, Prince William and Prince Harry, travelled to Balmoral. Her death was then confirmed on that evening at 6:30 p.m. British Summer Time. The Queen Elizabeth II died at age 96 because of old age at Balmoral Castle, Aberdeenshire, Scotland, and was succeeded by his youngest son, King Charles III, who is aged 73. As per the BritishHeritage.com, the hobbies of Queen were gardening, pigeon racing, stamp collecting, and horse riding. The burial of Queen Elizabeth II is in 19th September 2022 in King George VI Memorial Chapel in St. George Chapel in Windsor. That was the information I planned to talk in today's speech about Queen Elizabeth. If there is any mistake in the speech, I'm sorry and I apologize. And if you like my speech, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to turn on the bell icon to receive notifications about my speech. Once again, thank you so much to all.